Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Ask an Event Pro. This is your host, Francisco, product evangelist at Events.com. With me today, we've got a panel of some of the biggest, some of the masterminds behind one of the biggest, or some of the biggest events in the nation. Welcome, everyone. We've got Brian Davis, Event Director of Energy Events, Beth Salinger, Event Director and owner of Endurance Marketing, Chief Event Director, and Heidi Schwartz. She is the event director of the Cowtown Marathon. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. So today's episode will be about sponsorship strategies for your race. We're going to go ahead and get started with a question to our entire panel, and then we'll have some individual questions for each, and then finish with some additional questions for the entire panel. So, the first question I got for you guys and for our audience, give us one quick example of a successful sponsorship activation at one of your events. So, Brian, why don't we get started with you?
Sure. Well, we put on about 21 events a year, actually, including 2 Brewfests, and then, of course, running races, too, and the Vancouver USA Marathon is one of our staple events. But some of the local events that we actually do, and you chose on a little bit, but Jamba Juice is one of ours that we have at all of our races, and it's pretty successful. The fact that not only is it a mix of support and just a blending of just relationships, but they're able to give out about 1,000 or plus Jamba Juices to all of our participants, plus a card in the goodie bag that gets them bounced back for a free Jamba Juice at theirs. And I don't know about you, but everybody loves Jamba Juice after a nice run. And they've got about 16 stores up here in the Northwest that support us, and it's been a great blended relationship from the fact that they support us locally with their flags, their support, a little bit of cash, and then of course just providing those jobs to the participants. So it's more the experience that I always focus on for the participants. So it's not always about cash, but that one is one that really makes a big difference with all of our events.
Fantastic. Beth, now I know you work with some huge sponsors for a lot of the events that you work with. Maybe an example you can give us of a successful sponsorship activation in one of these events.
Well, sure. We work with Panera in Kansas City for the Hospital Hill Run, and this was actually a sponsor that left the event and came back to us, and it was because they weren't feeling that they were getting the benefits out of our partnership. And we really sat down, asked them what their goals were, how we can help them solve those. And they provide us a lot of food in a lot of different ways, including bagels for our volunteers race morning. They give us sack lunches for our expo, all of our vendors at the expo. They give us food for our board meetings. We're doing a sponsor summit, and we'll have Panera lunch for there. So it's a great sponsorship and partnership because they help us reduce our budget by finding unique ways where we need to provide food, and then they also get to showcase some of their great new yummy products. So it's been a really good partnership, and they've been back with us now for 5 years and growing.
Fantastic. And Heidi, I'd like to give you the opportunity as well, please. An example of a successful sponsorship activation for any of the events that you've worked with.
Well, I would say it would probably be Coca-Cola. We have a really good partnership with Coca-Cola, and they tend to be there with all of our events throughout the year with giving us product for the participants for when they're finishing, but also giving us cash and helping us with different types of products that they sell in the stores that they do activations at our event so that the runners can try them and along with the coupons, and so then we're seeing the traffic go to the stores where they've got an increase of sales for them. So it's a win-win because it gives us our product and cash that we need, but it's also giving them, they can see that they're getting new consumers as a result of the sponsorship.
Fantastic. And for our audience, our panels have experience with some of the biggest brands nationwide for sponsoring their events. So, it's very, very interesting to hear how they got a hold of some of these sponsors, how they managed to keep them. Beth works with a non-retail sponsors for some of their events, such as a Crown I'm so sorry. What's the sponsor there?
Crown Center. It's actually the
Crown
umbrella
Center. That's right.
corporation over Hallmark.
That's right. Blue Cross Blue Shield. So Heidi working with, you mentioned Coca-Cola, Miller Lite, Dole. So again, guys, some really really big sponsors nationwide that are working with these events. So really really excited to have them on today and talk to us about how they accomplish some of this. Now, Brian, I have a question for you, and I know that you mentioned you work with Jamba Juice, Cliff. These are obviously some brands that are very much aligned with the event, the type of event that you put on, which is very important. So how do you find that right local and national sponsor to work with you on your events?
I beg, plead, and pray. How about that?
Love it.
No,
Love it. Sometimes that's what we need to do, right?
sometimes we do. No, and you touched on some of those too, but with the events that we do too, like the rum run and the hot buttered run, which is a play on words, we actually have rum afterwards. And so Kraken Rum is one of ours, which is a national sponsor. We also do with Cuervo at our Mustache Dash that we do. And so we've got some other, liquor sponsors that we brought to the table. It's kind of interesting that nobody out there really is doing in the field. We also have the Cosmo 7K, which is an all-ladies race, and of course 3L's Vodka's behind that. So we tied that in because it's a good fit of the theme and what we're doing. And then trying to also bring some of that local too that is there. Like we work with Chuck's Produce, which is here in Vancouver, for actually providing a lot of the local fruit and things like that for the participants after the marathon. But it's for us, it's always different to find. It's nice to find a sponsor that will do the whole year, of course, or all of our events. But each race that we have, or each event, is kind of tailored to fit specific needs or different vibes, so to speak. And so I try to get those to align, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Our biggest thing is just like Beth said, is it's a partnership. It's not necessarily a sponsorship. Yeah, they're spending money and they're marketing and they're spending some dollars to get their name out there, but they want to feel good about what they're doing and what they're giving. And it's not in our hand to just take something, but more to give back to them and make sure they're getting what they need. So I really try to sit down and more of like, what do you want? Ask those questions to our sponsors, so they get something out of it. It's not just, oh, give me here's your invoice and send me a check, or we'll see at the finish line. But we try to hold their hand all the way through, and just to really make sure we're building that partnership and friendship. And a lot of ours are repeat business. We've got 3-year contracts with Kraken Rum and 3L's Vodka and some of these others, Cliff 2 to 3 years contracts. So we're doing something right with that end, but I think too, it's like I said, building that relationship, so partnership.
Absolutely, thank you, Brian. Beth, you're one of the biggest names in the endurance industry. You've been around putting on some of the biggest events out there, and you also work with an event management company called Endurance Marketing, and I know one of the services that you offer there is the sponsorship sales and fulfillment. So I assume you have a lot of experience with a lot of different types of sponsorship. So I'd really love to know, and if you can share with our audience, if you had to choose, would you pick digital or traditional sponsorship activation, and why?
So it's actually, you're asking the wrong question, because it's really not what I want to choose. It's really what our partners choose. And every year I sit down with our partners and we go over their goals for the year and how we can help them achieve those goals. And usually it's some combination of both digital and traditional. But even partners who we've been with, we've had some partners with Hospital Hill Run for 43 years. Every year we sit down and we ask that question again: what are your goals? How can we help you achieve those goals? How can we get creative? Because although people like throwing logos on shirts or putting banners up or having a booth at an expo, some of the traditional, people also want to make sure that they're unique and they stand out. And my job is to figure out a way that they have a one-of-a-kind experience, that they stand out from everybody else. And then at the end, I sit down, and in addition to giving them a wrap-up, I make sure that they feel that they were, all their goals, all their needs were met, and that we can start talking about the next year. So it's really not what I want, it's what they want.
Absolutely, Beth, and thank you for the correction there. So there you have it, folks. It's not what you want. You have to make sure that you're tailoring to the client. Make sure that that you post that as an option for them. Thank you, Beth, again. Heidi, I have a question for you. Now, we've mentioned that you work with some of the bigger brands out there as well, Coca-Cola, Dole, which, it's great. How do you ensure that these sponsors get what they paid for on event day?
Well, we make a list. We make sure we've got a punch list. I've got somebody that's assigned to that individual sponsor. So, for example, Dole flies in for our race weekend for Cowtown, and we have somebody that's assigned to pick them up at the airport, take care of them, get them to the hotel, get them to the race, get them to the VIP tent. Make sure that if they have questions or if they see something that they don't like, that we can fix it, and just taking care of them. And saying, is this what you want, or do you want us to do something different? And accommodating them as much as we can, because we're wanting them to be successful too. Because if they're not successful at our event, they're not going to come back. So I assign somebody to that sponsor to be with that sponsor for race weekend to help them, to give them the answers they need. And we have a punch list, if you want, of all the different things we make sure that are up prior to them coming, their signage, or, just making sure that everything that we told them they were going to get, they're getting, plus. We want to go above and beyond what they're expecting, so that when they leave, they can say, look what they did, they took care of us. And that's the key, is you've got to take care of your sponsors.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I do have another question for the entire panel here. So let's talk about some top tips for retaining sponsors year after year. Beth, we'll start with you, please.
So my two top tips are communication. So most people, because we are busy, and as race directors we are doing multiple jobs, wearing multiple hats. So we get a sponsor, we're nice to them race weekend, we get a check, and then next year we talk about a new contract. But you really need to communicate with them throughout the year to make sure that all their needs are being met, that things haven't changed, and just really to say hello and say, how are things going? The other thing that we do that's been very successful is we hold sponsor summits for our sponsors mid-year, so it's about 6 months before our event, generally during a quiet time. So for Kansas City, it's in January after the holidays. And we really sit there and we brainstorm about a variety of different things, not only the event and the industry, but also how to best to use an expo booth, or to use your complimentary entries, or what are great experiences for the participants. So we're constantly trying to brainstorm and communicate, and by doing that, we make sure our sponsors are always really happy.
Very interesting. Thank you, Beth. So communication, sponsor summits, networking, brainstorming sessions, top tips from Beth Salinger. Thank you. Thank you so much, Beth. Now, Heidi, how about you? Some top tips to retain sponsors year after year.
Well, I think one of the most important things is not to forget about them after the event's over. After that event's over, about a month after, you need to set up a time to meet with them and say, okay, what did you like? What didn't you like? And make sure that you can answer their questions if they have questions about different things that did happen or didn't happen. But on top of that, I bring them a notebook. I bring them a notebook with a jump drive, and in that it shows every newsletter that went out with their logo. It shows how many impressions there were on the internet with our newsletters, website, goodie bags, the virtual goodie bags, and some stats on the runners and demographics, so that when they're asked by their boss, why am I giving this money to this organization, they've got the tools to say this is why. So you don't want to just forget about them after the race is over and they gave you the check. You want to continue to communicate with them and be able to answer their questions and get them to ask you questions about what we can do more for them as we start planning the next year. Get them in early and talk to them, and it's a constant conversation.
Absolutely. So again, for the audience, Heidi Schwartz. So make sure you don't forget about them after the event. Make sure that you provide them with enough data to to show ROI on their, the return on their investment, and to make sure that you are asking all the right questions to continue to improve the relationship year after year. Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that. Now, Brian, how about you? Some top tips.
Well, I was going to kind of, I mean, they've touched on all the things that we normally do. I mean, they're hitting all the key spots. So I was going to go more of the, to the young people like me or the young directors that are going out there that keep hitting the pavement, plant those seeds. I've had sponsors come back 2 years after I've talked to them. They've said no for 2 years in a row, but then they've seen what we produced, and we go back. And so not being afraid to go back and talk to people and go back and build those relationships and you never know. You never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to come across, who's at your events, and they see what you're doing along the way. So they might be saying they're not interested at this time, but don't be afraid to go back to them a year later or 2 years later. I've had ones that have come back 3 years after I've talked to them that have been a pretty good, pretty valuable sponsorship. So Whole Foods is one that took a little bit of while. So just hammering on them. So.
Right. All right. Thank you, Brian. Now, I do have one more question for the panel. What is the biggest mistake you can make regarding sponsorships? Beth, if you can please give us your answer first.
I think it would be treating all sponsors the same. They're not. They all have unique needs, goals, and so if you think it's all cookie cutter, it will be a one-year, one-time sponsor. It's really taking the time to make sure that each sponsor feels unique and is heard.
Absolutely. Heidi, how about you?
I think it would be just to make, if you don't create a relationship with that sponsor, then your sponsorship won't continue. So you need to build on the relationship and be there constantly during the year. If you're just there to get the check and to slap their logo on something, that's a mistake. You're not going to retain or get new sponsors doing that. So it's just keeping touch with your sponsors and making them feel special and tailoring their sponsorship to what they need.
Absolutely. Make sure that you're not cookie cutting your sponsorship relationships, like Beth said, and Heidi, make sure that you're paying attention, making sure that you are constantly in front, communicating with your sponsors, making sure that they're happy. Brian, how about you?
I would actually have to, of course they said the great things too, but prejudging your sponsors, I've been caught before where somebody's come out a lot higher than I expected them to, or thought that they maybe were a smaller company than they really were, and they came out a heavy hitter, and they came out with a lot of support and a lot of just a lot of energy. And so making sure you're not prejudging them and asking for the Augusto, so to speak, and really pushing your sponsors to maximize what they have available in their resources, and not, I'm always asking, what else can you do? What else can you do? And not just can you do this one thing, but let's talk about and get creative and get bigger and better, and maybe things that they haven't even thought about. So it's back to kind of that cookie cutter. Don't put everybody in a little shell, or they're thinking they're going to be the same. Just because they're Coke, they'll do this, or just because they're this, they'll do that. I mean, it's really trying to get just try to maximize your sponsors too, because they're looking for it. If they're talking to you, they want to be there, and you want to give them everything. So ask. Never take no either. How about that?
Love it. All right. Well, Beth, Brian, Heidi, thank you so much for your time. This has been extremely helpful. Some of the audience, I'm sure, has taken some very interesting notes on how to improve sponsorship relationships in their events. For the audience, we do want to apologize. Willie Falks, the owner of Win-Win Events, was not able to join us today for some technical difficulties, but we look forward to having him in our show in the near future, maybe sometime next year early. For those that were able to attend, Beth, Brian, Heidi, again, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. We look forward also to having you on the show again in the near future, and we will talk to you soon. Don't forget, sorry, audience, don't forget to join us every Thursday at 11:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2:15 Eastern. And again, to our panelists, thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you.
Thanks.